All right, let's dive into this one. Robert Greene's The Laws of Human Nature.
Yeah, this is gonna be good.
Deception, narcissism, envy, how groups can like totally mess with your head.
We're talking the deep stuff here, the stuff we usually avoid.
Exactly. And what I love about Greene is he doesn't just like theorize.
Right.
He uses real stories, historical figures, even stuff from his own life to show you these laws in action.
Makes it real, you know.
So our mission,
Yeah.
pretty simple. We're going to help you understand these laws, how they actually play out in your life.
Yeah, because once you see them, you can't unsee them.
Oh, absolutely. And Greene starts off with a pretty provocative idea. He says humans aren't nearly as rational as we think we are.
Oh, this is so true.
I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
He uses the example of the plague in Athens.
Oh, yeah. During the Peloponnesian War, that was a total game changer.
Hmm?
Even Pericles, this brilliant Athenian leader, he couldn't control the chaos.
Really?
People just lost it. Complete panic.
I mean, I guess that makes sense, right? A
Right.
plague.
Greene says they basically fell into this group delirium.
Group delirium. That sounds intense.
It was. And here's the thing. They started blaming everyone except themselves for the plague.
Blaming everyone else.
That's what happens when irrationality takes over.
Okay, so we're not always rational. Big
Yeah.
surprise. But how does this apply to us today?
Oh, it's everywhere. Greene brings it into the modern world with the South Sea bubble. Remember that?
That financial bubble back in the 1700s?
Yeah.
Vaguely.
Well, get this. Sir Isaac Newton, the gravity guy, he lost a ton of money when that bubble burst.
No way. Newton.
Even brilliant minds are susceptible to irrationality, especially when you get caught up in the crowd.
It's like that fear of missing out, right? You just get swept up in it.
Exactly. Greene calls this high-grade irrationality. Your emotions hijack your brain, and bam, you make choices you regret.
Road rage. Impulse purchases. Stupid arguments.
Bingo.
Okay, so we all do this, but how do we catch ourselves?
Well, Greene says one key is looking back in your childhood. Certain experiences, he calls them trigger points.
Trigger points.
They can be positive or negative, but they shape how you react as an adult.
So if you're always seeking approval, maybe that's linked to like feeling overlooked as a kid.
Exactly. Or terrified of public speaking. Maybe there's a school memory haunting you.
Interesting. So recognize those patterns. Then what?
Manage them. And here's the fun part. Greene says you need to become a keen observer of people.
Like a detective.
Exactly. He talks about this psychiatrist, Milton Erickson, a master at reading people.
Sounds intense.
Erickson believed we're all constantly acting, trying to project an image.
Trying to seem cool and collected, even when we're not.
So pay attention to the nonverbal cues. Body language, facial expressions, tone of voice.
Because sometimes what someone's saying doesn't match how they're acting.
Exactly. Greene gives you these decoding keys.
Yeah.
Like, watch for inconsistencies between words and actions.
Oh, I see. Like your boss praises you, but then excludes you from a meeting.
Red flag. Read between the lines. Notice those subtle cues.
It's like learning a whole new language.
It is. And a powerful one.
Okay, this is blowing my mind. So we're learning to read people. What's next?
Let's talk about a specific personality type, the deep narcissist. Greene uses Howard Hughes as a case study.
Howard Hughes, the aviator guy.
Yeah. He was incredibly accomplished, but underneath, deeply insecure.
Really? You wouldn't know it from the outside.
Greene says he had this contradictory nature, driven to achieve, but also driven by a need for control. Probably because of his anxieties.
That makes sense. So what did that look like?
Workaholic tendencies, micromanaging, obsession with cleanliness. He needed everything just so.
I can see that.
But Greene takes this further. He looks at the narcissistic leader.
Oh boy.
Think Stalin.
Stalin, that's a scary example.
He was a master manipulator, initially charming, charismatic, but underneath, a deep-seated narcissism.
And that led to tyranny.
Exactly. Charm can be deceptive. Even the most charismatic leaders can have a dark side.
So pay attention to those red flags.
Always. And Greene's point isn't to just label people as evil. It's to understand the psychology so we can recognize those patterns and protect ourselves.
Like a self-defense manual for dealing with difficult people.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, so we've covered irrationality, narcissism.
Yeah.
What else?
Let's talk about envy. Greene says we all experience it.
Even if we don't want to admit it.
Exactly. It's natural. But it can be toxic. He uses Mary Shelley, the Frankenstein author, and her friend Jane Williams.
What happened?
Jane became insanely envious of Mary. Her talent, her husband, her success, everything. Ooh. Envy often disguises itself as resentment or moral superiority.
So sneaky. What are some signs we should watch out for?
Backhanded compliments, like, oh, you're so lucky to have gotten that promotion.
Yeah. Implying you didn't deserve it.
Exactly. Or poisonous praise, where they're actually trying to undermine you.
Okay, that's rough.
Yeah.
But how do we deal with our own envy?
Greene's advice: focus on finding your own unique path and purpose.
Because when you have a purpose, you're less focused on what others have.
Exactly. A strong sense of purpose can be an antidote to envy. He uses Anton Chekhov as an example.
Chekhov, the playwright.
Yeah. He had a tough childhood, but those experiences fueled his sense of purpose. He became a writer, a humanitarian.
He turned his struggles into strengths. Inspiring.
But Greene also warns against chasing false purposes. Things like money, fame, power for their own sake.
It's like chasing a mirage.
He uses the story of Michael Eisner, the former Disney CEO. Incredible success. But his need for control, his desire for more, it led to his downfall.
It's like that entitlement curse, right? Thinking you deserve everything.
Greene says true fulfillment comes from a purpose that aligns with your values, something that contributes to the world.
Okay, so much to think about already. Where do we go from here?
Next up, we're going to explore the power of groups, how they can influence our behavior, often in irrational ways. Greene uses a story from the Cultural Revolution in China. It's about the student, Jianhua, who gets caught up in the movement, even though it goes against his beliefs.
It gets lost in the group.
Exactly. And this can happen to anyone. It's that desire to conform. Sometimes it overrides our own thinking.
So it's not just about being in a cult. It's about any group, right?
Any group. Greene calls this the social force. And he uses another example, Lyndon B. Johnson in the U.S. Senate.
Sense Johnson. He was a master politician.
A master of manipulating the social force. He understood power dynamics, how to build alliances, use flattery, intimidation. He played people like chess pieces.
That's intense.
So, the takeaway: be aware of the power of the group. Don't lose sight of your own values.
Easier said than done.
It is. But awareness is the first step.
Okay, so groups can be tricky. What else should we watch out for?
Let's go even deeper. Explore one of Greene's most intriguing concepts: the shadow.
The shadow. Sounds ominous.
It's the dark side of your personality, the part you try to repress.
We all have one.
Everyone. And Greene says denying the shadow leads to unhealthy behaviors, self-sabotage.
So it's like pretending a part of you doesn't exist.
Exactly. And it always finds a way to come out. He uses the example of Richard Nixon. Incredibly ambitious, but also deeply insecure, paranoid.
The shadow in action.
And Greene provides practical steps for recognizing and integrating the shadow.
Integrating it.
He compares it to alchemy, transforming something base into something valuable.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So it's not about getting rid of the shadow. It's about understanding it.
Exactly. By integrating it, you become more whole, more authentic.
Okay, that's deep.
And it actually connects to our next topic: gender rigidity.
Gender rigidity.
Greene argues that repressing either masculine or feminine qualities limits your potential.
It's like we're only allowed to express half of who we are.
Exactly. He uses Caterina Sforza, this Renaissance countess, as an example.
Who is she?
She defied gender roles to protect her city. A true badass.
Love it.
She embraced both sides of her nature, and Greene says we can all learn from her.
So it's not about fitting into rigid categories. It's about embracing the full spectrum.
Exactly. It leads to greater creativity, adaptability, resilience.
Okay, we've covered so much already.
Yeah.
Irrationality, narcissism, envy, the power of the group, the shadow, gender rigidity.
And this is just the beginning.
I'm ready for more.
Stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive into the laws of human nature.
Okay, so, where we left off, we were talking about all these pretty heavy topics, right? Irrationality, narcissism, envy, the power of the group. Like, wow, it's a lot to process.
It is, and I feel like we just scratched the surface.
Exactly. But Greene doesn't stop there.
Oh, no.
He goes even deeper.
Okay, I'm ready. Bring it on.
So one of the things that really struck me in this book is how he connects all these ideas to our fear of death. Like, deep down, a lot of our behavior stems from this primal fear.
Fear of death, huh? That's pretty heavy stuff.
It is. But think about it. By avoiding the thought of death, we end up avoiding a lot of other unpleasant realities, too.
Okay, yeah, I see that. It creates anxiety, a sense of emptiness, like we're not really living fully.
Because we're so busy running from this big, scary thing.
Exactly. And Greene challenges us to break free from that pattern, to confront the reality of death.
I mean, that's easier said than done, right?
Oh, absolutely. But he's not saying we should become all morbid and obsessed with it.
Right.
It's about confronting it in a way that helps us live more intentionally. more courageously.
So facing our fear can actually make us more alive.
That's the paradox, right? But, Greene doesn't just dwell on the heavy stuff. He also offers some really practical insights into how we can use these laws of human nature to our advantage.
Okay, that sounds more up my alley. Let's hear it.
So, for example, he talks about this idea of covetousness. Like, we're all hardwired to want what we don't have.
The grass is always greener. Right.
Exactly. But Greene says we can actually use this to our advantage.
Hold on. You're saying we can use our covetousness to achieve our goals?
It sounds counterintuitive, but yeah. He offers some pretty intriguing strategies. One of them is to become an elusive object of desire.
What does that even mean? Like, play hard to get?
Kind of. He uses Coco Chanel as a brilliant example.
Coco Chanel, the fashion designer.
Yeah. She
Huh.
was a master of human psychology. She deliberately made her designs difficult to obtain.
Really? Like limited editions and stuff?
Exactly. It created a sense of exclusivity, scarcity.
Which made them even more desirable.
Exactly. It's like that old saying, the best things in life are worth waiting for.
So how do we apply that in our own lives?
Greene suggests creating a sense of mystery around yourself. Don't reveal everything at once, hold back some information.
Like, be a little bit mysterious.
Exactly. Make people curious, make them want to know more, and maintain a sense of coolness. Detachment.
Don't seem too eager.
Right. Project self-sufficiency. Ironically, that makes you more attractive. And don't be afraid to challenge the status quo. Be a little bit rebellious.
Coco Chanel definitely had that going on.
She did. It's about finding that element that makes you stand out.
Okay, but covetousness can be a dangerous game.
Oh, absolutely. It's a slippery slope. Greene acknowledges that. He uses the South Sea bubble as an example.
The South Sea bubble, that was that huge financial crash, right?
Yeah. Back in 1720, people were buying shares in this company that promised insane riches.
It was all based on hype.
Exactly. The bubble burst. Countless investors were ruined.
And I remember you saying that even Sir Isaac Newton got caught up in it.
He did. Initially made a profit, but then got greedy, reinvested at the peak, lost a fortune.
Wow. So if Newton can fall for it, anyone can.
The takeaway: detach yourself from the immediate rush of events. Look at the bigger picture. Develop a long-term perspective.
Resist the temptation of quick gains.
Exactly. Be wary of the heights. Stay rational, even when everyone else is losing their minds.
That's good advice. But how do you stay rational in a world that's constantly bombarding us with messages designed to trigger our covetousness?
Good point. It's tough. But Greene says we need to cultivate contentment with what we have.
Okay.
Focus on your own goals, your values. Don't compare yourself to others.
It's about finding that inner balance, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about covetousness. Let's move on to another aspect of human nature that Greene explores in depth: the influence game. He says we're all constantly trying to influence each other, whether we realize it or not.
It's true. And there are certain laws that govern this game. Greene uses Lyndon B. Johnson as an example.
Johnson, the former president.
Yep. He was incredibly savvy, knew how to persuade, manipulate people to get what he wanted.
He was a master negotiator, right?
Exactly. But Greene points out that it wasn't just about charm or charisma.
Oh, so there was more to it than just being likable.
He had a system, a set of strategies he used to gain influence and power. One of the most important was making other people feel important, valued.
Like stroking their egos?
In a way, yeah. He was a great listener. He'd ask for advice, flatter people, make them feel like they were the ones in control.
Clever. But was it always ethical?
Not always. Greene points out that Johnson also used intimidation tactics, played on people's fears and insecurities.
So it's a cautionary tale. Power can be used for good or evil.
Right. But Greene also provides strategies for using influence ethically and effectively. He emphasizes building genuine relationships, understanding people's motivations, finding common ground.
So it's about persuasion, not manipulation.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. Now let's talk about something that's crucial for navigating life effectively: having a sense of purpose. Greene argues that finding your purpose is essential for psychological and emotional well-being.
It's so true. But a lot of people struggle with this. Like, what is my purpose? How do I find it?
It can feel very abstract and elusive.
It can. But Greene offers guidance. He uses the story of Anton Chekhov, the writer, to illustrate the power of purpose. Chekhov had a tough childhood, but he discovered his passion for writing.
So writing wasn't just a job for him.
No, it was his mission. He used his talent to explore the human experience, advocate for social change.
So having that kind of purpose, gives you direction, motivation.
Resilience.
Yeah.
It helps you overcome adversity, find meaning in your work.
Okay, but how do we actually find our purpose? Where do we even begin?
Greene encourages us to explore our interests, experiment, pay attention to our inner voice.
What are we passionate about? What gives us that sense of fulfillment?
Exactly. But he also warns against chasing what he calls false purposes, like money, fame, power for their own sake.
Yeah, those things don't really satisfy in the long run.
He uses Michael Eisner, the former Disney CEO, as an example. Eisner was hugely successful, but his pursuit of power and control led to his downfall.
That old more mentality, right? Never enough.
Greene says we can avoid that trap by focusing on our values, our relationships, our contribution to the world.
Define success on our own terms, not society's terms.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about finding our individual purpose. Now let's zoom out and consider the power of groups, how our social interactions shape us.
Yeah. Greene argues that groups have an enormous influence on us, often leading us to act in ways we wouldn't as individuals. He uses the example of the Cultural Revolution in China.
That was a pretty dark period, right?
It was. Millions of people were swept up in fanaticism and violence, often turning against their own friends and neighbors.
It's scary how easily people can lose themselves in a group mentality.
Greene says we have this innate desire to conform, to fit in, and sometimes that overrides our critical thinking. He also uses the example of Lyndon B. Johnson in the U.S. Senate.
Johnson again.
He was a master of understanding group dynamics, how to build alliances, play on people's insecurities, manipulate the flow of information.
He was like a puppet master.
In a way, yeah. The takeaway for us: be aware of the power of the group. Don't get so caught up in the energy that you lose sight of your own values.
Maintain that balance between fitting in and standing out.
Exactly.
Okay, let's go even deeper now. Explore one of Greene's most thought-provoking concepts, the shadow.
Yeah, you ready for this?
Hit me with it.
The shadow is the darker side of our personality, the part of ourselves that we try to repress, hide from the world.
So we all have this dark side.
Everyone. And Greene argues that denying it can have serious consequences. Unhealthy behaviors, self-sabotage.
Like trying to pretend a part of you doesn't exist.
Exactly. But it always finds a way to come out. He uses the example of Richard Nixon, driven by ambition, but also plagued by insecurity and paranoia.
So his shadow was running the show.
In a way, yeah. But here's the good news. Greene offers practical advice for recognizing and integrating the shadow.
Integrating it. I thought we were supposed to get rid of it.
That's the common misconception. He compares it to alchemy, transforming something base into something valuable.
Turning darkness into light.
Exactly. By embracing our shadow, we become more whole, more authentic, more powerful.
Okay, that's a lot to chew on.
It is. And it connects to another important topic: gender rigidity.
Gender rigidity.
Greene argues that clinging to rigid definitions of masculinity and femininity can be incredibly limiting.
It's like we're putting ourselves in boxes.
Exactly. He uses the example of Caterina Sforza, a Renaissance countess who defied gender roles to protect her city.
Sounds like my kind of woman.
She was a total badass. And Greene says we can all learn from her by embracing both our masculine and feminine qualities.
So it's about finding that balance, not letting society dictate who we should be.
Exactly.
Okay, we've covered so much ground already. The shadow, gender fluidity, finding our purpose. What else does Greene have for us?
Well, next we're going to explore the nature of aggression.
Aggression. Isn't that always a bad thing?
Not necessarily. Greene argues that everyone possesses aggressive energy. The key is learning how to channel it effectively.
Okay, that makes sense. So there's a healthy way to be aggressive.
Absolutely. He breaks down aggression into two main types: overt aggression, which is more direct and confrontational, and passive aggression, which is more subtle and insidious.
Oh, passive aggression. That's the one that drives me crazy.
I know, right? It's like you know something's wrong, but you can't quite put your finger on it.
Exactly. And then you end up feeling like you're going crazy.
Greene dives deep into the strategies of passive aggression, giving us the tools to recognize and counter it.
I'm all ears. I need all the help I can get in that department.
Well, he points out some common tactics like backhanded compliments, playing the victim, employing guilt trips.
I know those all too well.
But he also offers strategies for addressing passive aggression directly without losing your cool, setting boundaries, communicating clearly, assertively.
So it's about standing up for yourself, but in a way that doesn't escalate the situation.
Exactly. But Greene doesn't just focus on passive aggression. He also tackles overt aggression, arguing that it's not inherently bad. It's all about how we channel it.
So there are times when it's appropriate to be overtly aggressive.
He says it can be a powerful force for achieving our goals, overcoming obstacles, even protecting ourselves and those we care about.
It's about harnessing that energy, that fire in the belly.
Right, and using it to fuel our actions in a positive way.
Okay, I'm starting to see how aggression can be a good thing. But let's move on to another topic that's often misunderstood: authority.
Yeah. In today's world, we're constantly bombarded with messages about who has authority, who deserves to be in charge.
But Greene argues that authority is often misunderstood, right?
He does. We often equate authority with power or position. But true authority is something much deeper.
So it's not just about having a fancy title or being the boss.
Exactly. Greene explores how true authority is established and maintained, drawing on some really fascinating historical examples. He examines the case of Louis XVI, the French king, who lost his authority during the French Revolution.
Poor Louis. Sounds like he was a bit out of touch.
He was clinging to outdated traditions, a sense of entitlement that ultimately led to his downfall. And Greene contrasts Louis' approach with that of Xenophon, the Athenian general who led his men through some incredibly challenging circumstances.
Xenophon sounds like a true leader.
He was, and Greene points to him as an example of what he calls inner authority.
Inner authority, what's that?
Xenophon didn't rely on force or intimidation to lead. He inspired his men through his vision, his competence, his genuine concern for their well-being.
So it's about earning respect, not demanding it.
Exactly. And Greene argues that we can all cultivate this kind of inner authority, this sense of presence and confidence that inspires others to follow our lead.
Okay, I like that. But how do we do it? How do we develop inner authority?
Greene emphasizes self-awareness, emotional intelligence, a strong sense of purpose.
So it's an inside job.
In a way, yeah. It's about knowing yourself, understanding your strengths and weaknesses, managing your emotions effectively.
And then translating those inner qualities into actions that inspire others.
Precisely.
Okay, let's shift gears now and talk about something a little bit more abstract.
Yeah.
The zeitgeist, the spirit of the times.
Yes. Greene argues that every generation has its own unique set of values, and that history often moves in cycles.
I've heard that idea before, like what goes around comes around.
Exactly. He uses some great examples, like the contrast between the silent generation and the baby boomers, to illustrate how the zeitgeist shapes our behavior and worldview.
Yeah, I can definitely see how my own generation has influenced my perspective on things.
Greene encourages us to go beyond simply acknowledging the zeitgeist. He wants us to develop an awareness of how it's shaping us so we can use that understanding to our advantage.
So it's like understanding the current of a river so you can navigate it more effectively.
Precisely. He suggests that by understanding the zeitgeist, we can anticipate trends, connect with our audience, and even play a role in shaping the future.
Wow, that's powerful stuff. So it's not just about being swept along by the tide, but learning how to ride the waves.
Exactly.
Okay, now let's bring this deep dive to a close by exploring Greene's final and perhaps most profound law, the reality of death.
Yes, the big one. The one we all try to avoid thinking about.
But Greene argues that this avoidance actually diminishes the quality of our lives.
He does. He uses the story of Flannery O'Connor, a writer who faced a terminal illness with incredible courage.
So she stared death in the face.
She did. And Greene points to her as an example of how confronting death can actually lead to a richer, more meaningful life.
It's about shifting our perspective, right? Seeing death not as something to be feared, but as a natural part of life.
Exactly. And by accepting the inevitability of death, we can liberate ourselves from all those anxieties and distractions that prevent us from truly living.
Wow, that's a powerful message. So we've covered a lot of ground in this second part of our deep dive. Covetousness, the influence game, the power of the group, finding our purpose, the shadow, gender fluidity, and even the reality of death.
Phew. It's a lot to take in. But Greene's insights are so rich and thought-provoking. They really make you think about the world and yourself in a whole new way.
I'm definitely feeling that. My brain is doing somersaults right now.
That's a good thing. It means you're engaging with the material.
Okay, good. So what's next? Where do we go from here?
Well, in part 3, we're going to continue exploring Greene's ideas and see how we can apply them to our own lives in a practical way.
Okay, sounds good. I'm ready for more.
Great, I'll see you there. So we've been unpacking Robert Greene's The Laws of Human Nature, and man, there's just so much in here.
I know, right? It's like every chapter is a whole deep dive in itself.
Totally. But one thing that keeps coming up, like a golden thread through all of it, is self-awareness.
Self-awareness. It's funny because it seems so basic, but it's actually really hard.
Oh, for sure. I mean, Greene really hammers home the point that truly understanding your own nature is like essential for navigating life, for achieving your goals. Like, you got to know yourself, both the good and the bad.
I guess it's kind of like having a map of your own mind, right?
Yeah.
So you can avoid the pitfalls, find the best paths.
Exactly. But the cool thing is, Greene doesn't just talk about it. He gives you actual strategies for developing self-awareness.
Okay, so give me some tips. How do we actually do this?
Well, one thing he talks about is paying attention to those moments when you're feeling super triggered, overly emotional, like when you just lose it.
Oh, yeah. I definitely have those moments. Not
Yeah.
my proudest.
We all do. But Greene suggests that those moments, like those meltdowns, those are actually clues,
So what?
deeper patterns, unresolved issues from the past.
So basically, my freakouts are opportunities for self-discovery.
Exactly. It's about being curious about your own reactions. Like, why am I acting this way? What's going on beneath the surface?
I like that. It's like being a detective of your own mind.
That's a great way to put it. And another thing Greene suggests is getting feedback from other people, like people you trust, to be honest with you.
Oh, man. That can be tough.
I know. Nobody really likes to hear criticism, even if it's constructive.
But I guess it's important, right, to get that outside perspective.
It is, because sometimes we have blind spots. We don't see ourselves as clearly as others do.
Okay, that makes sense. So pay attention to emotional triggers, get feedback from others. Any other tips?
Yeah, Greene also talks about this idea of detachment.
Detachment, like emotionally detaching yourself.
Yeah, from your emotions, from the opinions of other people. He says that when you can step back and observe things from a more neutral perspective, you can see things more clearly, make better decisions.
It's like not getting swept up in the drama.
Exactly. Creating a little space between yourself and your reactions.
That sounds amazing. But honestly, it's not always easy to do, is it?
It's a practice. It takes effort. Greene compares it to mental training.
Mental training, like for a marathon or something.
Yeah, kind of. You're strengthening your ability to observe your thoughts and feelings without being controlled by them.
So are there specific exercises we can do to build that detachment muscle, so to speak?
Well, he mentions things like mindfulness meditation, being present in the moment without judgment.
Okay, yeah, I've heard about that. It's supposed to be good for stress too, right?
Definitely. And journaling can be helpful. Writing down your thoughts and feelings can help you process them, gain some insights.
I've tried that before. Sometimes it's amazing what comes out when you just start writing.
It is, and it's not all serious. Greene also emphasizes the importance of having a sense of humor.
Oh, that's good. I was starting to feel a little overwhelmed.
I get it. But it's important to remember that we're all just human. We all make mistakes. We all have our quirks.
So don't take yourself too seriously.
Exactly. Learn to laugh at yourself. It's the best medicine sometimes. And remember, this whole journey of self-discovery, it's ongoing.
There's always more to learn.
Always. And you don't have to do it alone. Greene talks a lot about the importance of connecting with other people, seeking mentors, learning from those who've been there before.
That's encouraging. So it's like we're all in this together.
We are, and that's actually a perfect segue to our final thought for this deep dive. We've spent all this time exploring these laws of human nature.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey.
It has. But now the question is, how are you going to use this knowledge to navigate your own life, your relationships? These laws, they're powerful tools, but it's up to you to decide how you're going to use them.
That's a good point. It's not about manipulating other people. It's about understanding them and understanding ourselves.
Exactly. It's about becoming more self-aware, more compassionate, more effective in the world.
So keep exploring, keep learning, and keep growing.
Well said. And thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of the laws of human nature.
It's been a pleasure. Until next time.